So I guess Icon started as a desire to provide a space where people could interrogate their faith, ask difficult questions about their lives, and a place where we could be instruments of each other's further conversion. In some respects, the philosophy of Icon is so as not to offend anybody. We try to offend everybody. So whatever you believe, be open to being wrong. We want to create this space where we lay our identities at the door, just for an hour. There's no Jew, Gentile, slave, free, male, female, no Republican, Democrat, theist, atheist, Christian, non-Christian, gay or straight. None of that comes into the actual liturgical space. Of course, you can't really forget if you're a man or a woman, or if you're conservative or liberal, but we performatively lay those things down so that we can join together and begin to explore and interrogate our faith through the use of music, art, poetry, liturgy. I think there's a universal problem, not a problem connected with Northern Ireland or anything like that, a universal problem that we all seek certainty and we all seek satisfaction. So all of us want to have a story that tells us why we on this side of the river are right and those people on that side of the river are wrong, why we are good and they are bad. We all want a story that tells us why we're here, where we're going, and what we should do in the meantime. When we're children, we start with this story whenever our parents tell us that we're strong when we're crying, or we're brave when we're cowering. That's a lie. If we're crying, we're not brave. Or you say to a little girl, oh, you're a little princess. She's not a little princess. You know, we create these lies, these stories, but the stories are great because they give you a sense of mastery. They give the child a sense of, oh, I'm independent, I'm strong, I'm beautiful. And it covers over the fact that they're dependent, that they don't really have an understanding of what's going on in the world. And as we grow, we simply develop these stories into cultural, political, and religious ones. And they do exactly the same thing. They cover over our unknowing. They cover over our brokenness. They give us a sense of mastery. They tell us that I'm right and they're wrong. And so Icon was a place where we wanted to begin to interrogate those beliefs that we have that separate us from each other. Because as soon as I meet you, if you have different beliefs and practices from me, I generally think of you as monstrous and weird. If you have different views on religion or on marriage or on sexuality or something like that, I think, wow, you're bizarre. And I either try to consume you to make you like me, and if I can't do that, I want to vomit you out. I want to get you out of my social body because I can't integrate your difference. Or I might tolerate you as long as you don't tell me what you believe and hide it behind closed doors. Or I engage in interfaith dialogue where we discuss where we're both in agreement. We wanted to reject all four of those and say, because in all four of them, I'm right. In the first three, I'm right and you're wrong. And in the fourth, we're both right. Let's have tea and biscuits, right? I wanted to create a space where I see myself through your eyes and I encounter my own monstrosity. I encounter my own beliefs and practices as weird and contingent. And in doing that, face up to the anxieties in my life and give them a place to breathe. And one final thing I'll say, sorry, is that's the one thing we want certainty. And everybody's offering it. Everywhere you turn, people are saying, believe this, think this. The other thing is satisfaction. We all think there's something that will fill this gap in our lives. Might be looking a certain way, buying a certain product, worshipping a certain God. And again, for me, this is a problem. That God just becomes another product like BMW. God is just another thing that will satisfy your soul. And in Icon, we wanted to explore the idea that actually we need to embrace our dissatisfaction, embrace our brokenness, embrace our suffering, speak it into being, and find God not as the solution to it, but rather in the midst of it. And find God not as the guarantee that we're right, but rather God as a mystery that dwells in the unknowing, where we acknowledge our brokenness and our inability to have the answers. So you can see all around you that churches that claim certainty and claim to have the answers seem to be growing. And that makes total sense to me, because belief is easy. We think that belief is difficult. You know, and you hear that in church, oh, getting people to believe is difficult. But actually, I used to do that. I used to be an evangelist, and I planted a church in the evangelical tradition. And getting people to believe was easy, because we want certainty. We love to know why we're here. We love a story that tells us that we're important, that we have a place, a story that covers over our brokenness. And so selling certainty is easy. Asking people to interrogate their beliefs, to question some of the things that they hold most dearly, the values that have been passed on to them by their family and the family before that, these values that have been so important to the community, to actually place those into question, to actually start asking difficult questions about the things that you've just taken to be true for so long, that's difficult. That's profoundly hard. So you've got to be 10, 20, 100 times better if you're going to ask people to ask questions and to doubt than if you're going to give them certainty. The other thing about monstrosity, I have a story I tell myself about myself. I'm a good person, I'm a kind person, I'm together. But the truth is, I, like everybody, am a haunted house. There are ghosts within me. Now, most ghost stories have this structure. Ghosts are here because they can't let go of us, right? But if you take a film like Ricky Gervais's Ghost Town, the premise is reversed, and we find out at the end that the ghosts are there because we can't let go of them. And in a sense, we are full of ghosts. People who have hurt us, people we've loved and lost, and we hide those. We hide it from ourselves. But the truth comes out in our dreams or late at night when we're looking at the stars. And we realise that we do have brokenness within us. We do have those kinds of things happening. But we hide it, and we hide it, and we hide it. But when we hide those things, they come out in other ways, in anger and aggression. They come out in, self-abuse. But we don't really see it. There's things about me that I don't see in myself, and I need the other person's eyes in order to see them in myself. I need someone to say, I think you're hurt, I think you're depressed, I think there's something you're dealing with. And at first I might disagree with you, but as I see myself through your eyes, and as I hear your stories, I've seen you've acted in X, Y, and Z ways that I've hidden from myself because it doesn't fit in with the story of who I am. As I'm confronted with that, I'm confronted with my own darkness and brokenness. But that's the first step in finding healing. If you take AA as an example, the first step is admitting that you're an alcoholic. Before that, you might say, oh, I could give up any time I want. I'm not an alcoholic. But there's a point where you say, no, that's a lie. That's a story I'm telling myself about myself that doesn't fit with my material reality. So the second step is seeing that, and you see it through the eyes of other people. You do have a problem. Look at who you're hurting. Look at what you're doing. So through the eyes of other people, you suddenly realize, I am an alcoholic. You're courageous enough to admit it. And you admit it publicly in front of a group of people. And here's the trick. A group of people who don't ask you to change. Who just bear witness to it and say, yeah, I know how you feel. They bear witness to your suffering in a community of grace where you are accepted for who you are. But in that acceptance, you begin to change. It's in that water that you can finally breathe. What we want, often is to escape our brokenness and have somewhere where we can kind of like find enjoyment and find pleasure. But the trick is, in running away from our suffering, we're not freed from it, we're most oppressed by it. So take the example of if you break up with somebody and you go out on a real drink and drugs binge. You go out and you have a great time and you forget about your pain. But the next day, it comes back and it hits you, the return of the repressed, and you feel even worse than before, and you have to go out and you have to party again. But it doesn't help you work through your issues. But contrast that with going to a singer-songwriter. A singer-songwriter, in a sense, sings about pain and suffering. And if you really listen to them, you come into contact with your own pain and suffering in a way that you can cope with. And as you listen to the music, you don't necessarily cry, but you feel the cathartic release of crying. Kierkegaard said, what is a poet? A poet is someone who screams and cries in agony, but whose lips are so formed that when they cry out, beautiful music is formed. And so when we say, sing to us again, we are really saying, may new disasters befall you. In a way, the singer-songwriter is showing their pain, and we're capturing something of that. And then when we leave, we feel a little better, like we've started to do the act of mourning. Now, it doesn't happen just one-off. You have to kind of continue through art and music to work that through. For me, the church is a little bit like the drink and drugs binge. You go in and you sing your songs and you feel great and you feel fantastic, and that's all fine. I've got no problems with that. I've got the problem with what happens when you leave. And the pain of your suffering comes back and it hits you. For me, the church should be more like the singer-songwriter. The place where in the liturgical activity, our own pain is reflected back to us, but in a way that we can begin to mourn and work through it and acknowledge it. Not so that we're constrained by it, but so that it's robbed of its sting. If I can use one example, if you imagine a family meeting once a month on a Sunday for dinner, and one of the sons dies, and they continue to meet, and let's imagine that nobody talks about it around the table for a while. Because no one talks about it, and they try to have fun, and they try to emulate what they used to have, are they free from the shadow of that death? I would say probably not. But then let's imagine one of them says, I really miss John. Someone else cries a little and someone else tells a funny story and someone laughs. And then they sit and they start talking about it and they bring it to the surface. I would say they're not oppressed by the suffering in talking about it. That's when they begin to become freed from it and begin to work it through. So the trick is, if you directly try and grasp life and pleasure, you will miss it. You will repress, and your darkness and brokenness will destroy you. But if you give that up, you give up the pursuit of life and pleasure, and you bear witness to each other's brokenness, the trick is this: you find a deep joy. You find life in all its fullness, in the very act of letting it go. But I do know that there are a lot of churches which really emphasize God as the guarantee of certainty. God is that which will bring satisfaction and wholeness and completeness. And I think that message plays well in communities that have been more oppressed. The more poverty-stricken and the more oppressed the community is, the more likely you're going to want to embrace a message of you can be fulfilled, you can be happy. One of the things we see with the growth of the Pentecostal movement, for example, in Africa, is the idea that sometimes if you really are broken, deeply, deeply broken, if you've been deeply, deeply oppressed, you can't just open yourself up to doubt and unknowing and dissatisfaction. It will destroy you. It's like if we, in a smaller sense in my own life or in your life, if you go through a breakup or a death of someone you love, it's sometimes very hard to mourn. You want to protect yourself from that, and that's not bad. I can understand that. Your body won't let you do the mourning too quickly, because otherwise you'd kill yourself. And sometimes when our defense mechanisms don't work well, you see people do that. So in some respects, we've got to tread lightly with people, especially people who have gone through deep depression and deep suffering. However, I would say that a church that simply celebrates, you can be happy, you can be satisfied, everything's okay, everything's great, you have the answer, ultimately doesn't help you work through the difficulties, doesn't help you embrace the difficulties of your life. It becomes a place that you go and you have a great time, you leave, you have the rest of your life is difficult, and then you just long for the next worship service, the next conference, the next thing that you'll get the big buzz out of. So the rest of your life is awful, the rest of your life is terrible, but once a week you have this great experience. I want to say no. I want to see people's lives transformed throughout the week, that you don't find God in this crazy worship service. You find God in the most mundane of circumstances. Because, one of three things, if you believe God is this being who will satisfy you, that works out generally in one of three ways. You either believe that that's going to happen in the next life. So I'll be reconciled to God, not now, but in the next life everything's going to be great. Well, that makes this world rubbish. It makes this world like a waiting room. I'm really unsatisfied now, but when I get to heaven, then I'll be happy. But then some people might say, well, yes, no, you can meet God here and now. God can satisfy your soul now. Then one of two things happen. Either you don't really ever feel it. It's always the person beside you who feels it. They have the spiritual experience. They're the one who falls over. They're the one who has all the heebie-jeebies, and you never experience it. And you're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And that's terrible. That's awful. But two, what if you're the person who has those experiences and you fall over and you have this great experience? You have to get up again. And then often what you do is you go, I have to have that again. I have to have that again. My argument is that way of thinking about God is problematic. That actually, if we think of God as found in the very act of love itself, that God is this transcendent mystery, this presence that we feel when we love, that means that if I love my children, if I love my partner, if I love my job, if I love the world, I find God in the midst of the mundane, not in the special weekly or monthly gathering, not in the next life, but God is rather infused in every part of my life, the more that I love. The key problem for me is that the best worship music you'll find, traditional or contemporary worship music, is in the charts. If you take contemporary worship music as this structure, some X is placed as the highest value that we should devote ourselves to. Then you see that always in pop music, revenge, a woman, a man, money, whatever it is, something has risen to this level of like being, that's worth everything. And then the song is a devotion to that. That's why in a lot of contemporary churches, they just mimic contemporary music, because that's a multi-billion-dollar industry that does it very, very well. All we have to do is change the X for Jesus, Now, for me, the church is the one place you should go in your week to not hear worship music. Worship music's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. And for me, the church is the one place in your week you go to not listen to worship music. And what I mean by that is that, for me, God should not be seen primarily as this object that we love, but rather as the mysterious transcendence visible and present in the act of love itself. What I mean by that is that there is place for joyful worship music. There is a place for celebrating life in the music that I envisage in the liturgical structure. But it's about finding God in the midst, not as the object that will make everything fine and good, not as the object that's going to come in and guarantee that we're right and our enemies are wrong and that everything's going to be great. But the joy of someone like Tom Waits or Bon Iver or these bands, that it's just like in the midst of the difficulties of life, we embrace it. We love it. We find meaning. We find beauty. We find a reason to live and a reason to die. And the difference between here's a difference between what I would call the idol. An idol is something that you think will satisfy you, right? Whatever it is, whatever's that thing that you think will satisfy the gap in your being. The thing about an idol is it's like it looks like it's going to give you everything until you get it. So if it's $10 million and you get it, you go, okay, it's not that great after all. It's okay, I get a nice car, a nice house, but it didn't satisfy the longing in my heart. If it's this woman or man, if it's God, whatever it is, when you get it, the idol doesn't satisfy. The idol is something you desire until you get it. And you might enjoy it, but desire is kind of closed off. In love, you love somebody if you miss them, not when they're away, but if you miss them when they're there, right? Because the idol is something you miss because you don't have and you really want it. But when you love somebody, you miss them when they're there, because they are like a universe. They are like the black holes in cartoons that you put down and they open up. The small frame of your beloved opens up to an interior world of infinite proportions. So when they arrive as someone who is yet to come. There's always more and more of them to discover and to learn of. So the thing about the idol is what you don't have and want, and when you get it, you realize it's nothing. In love, you get what you want. You get the person or the world if you love the world, but you also don't get it because there's so much more to explore. So your desire is not ended. It's birth. It goes deeper and it goes more and more and more. So why am I saying all of this? Well, in a way, when we think of God as that object that will satisfy us, that's an idol for me. That's all that is. But God as found in this very act of love, is both something we can have, we grasp God, and yet always opens up the sense that we cannot have God. Like we're a ship sunken in the depths of the ocean. The ocean contains the ship contains the ocean. But while the ocean contains all of the ship contains but a fragment of the ocean. That this unknowing is not swallowed up, it grows in the act of faith. The music that I think is spiritual music, wherever you find it, is the music that brings you into touch with your brokenness, that helps you find transcendence in existence. So, for example, in the communities that I'm visiting, get local singer-songwriters will be doing the worship music, you know. Every worship team should have at least one breakup song. My friend Vince says every worship team should have one breakup song in their set, and not a breakup song with Jesus, you know, a breakup song, you know. There should be songs of lamentation and songs of joy, but not songs that have God as the product, that treats God like a BMW, that treats God like a new house. Mm-hmm. That is, for me, is idolatry and has no place within the liturgical space. Kind of trying to explore what it means to believe. In the contemporary church, we have this idea that belief is what we think. So our belief happens at this epistemological level. And I want to kind of argue that actually what we think is often a cover for what we believe. That what we believe is hidden in our actions. If I want to know what you believe, I should look at what you do. I look at how you behave, that what drives you is where your beliefs come from. And in the Bible, that's called the heart. It talks about, you know, the heart being this place, not the mind. It doesn't talk about the mind. So, for example, I say to people, oh, I love animals, or I don't believe in child slavery. But then I kind of know that the dairy industry is very cruel. But I don't, as long as I don't have to kind of fully acknowledge it, I can say I love animals, but obviously I don't. If I know that this industry is very, very cruel to animals, and yet I participate in it, I don't love animals. Whatever I say, that's just a lie that I'm telling myself. Or I say that I don't believe in child slavery, but if I buy that chocolate bar from the local store, I kind of know that it was picked from the Ivory Coast, the cocoa beans, you know, and I know that 10, 11, 12-year-old children were doing that. I know they're being sexually abused, physically abused. I know they're being killed. I know that. I mean, we all know that, don't we? Like, I mean, you have to be, you know, pretty much most of us should know that. If you don't, you know it now, you know. And so then if I go and I buy the chocolate bar, well, I believe in child slavery. I mean, I can't deny it. But of course, but I do. Because I want to be a good citizen. I want to pretend that I don't believe in child slavery. I don't believe in sweatshops. But if I'm pretty sure that this shirt was made in a sweatshop, then I do believe in sweatshops. But strangely, within the church, there's this idea that what you believe is here in your mind, which is fascinating, a fascinating idea. Find it deeply intriguing. You know, I mean, I found this article about a politician in 1932 magazine, Homes and Gardens. This thing is still going, and it showed you around this house of this politician, showed you his paintings, and they were really made jokes about how his signature was illegible and how he loved children. He was a strict vegetarian, never touched a drop of alcohol. He, you know, would take the kids out for walks, and he loved Alsatians. I mean, this is a really nice guy, you know. Of course, it turns out it's Adolf Hitler. You know, this is Homes and Gardens going around Hitler's house, and you kind of go, "What? This is strange. Like, this is a lie." But no, it's not a lie. It's true. The guy, if you were in that environment, Hitler's probably a lovely guy. The truth of who Hitler is, where his beliefs are, is not in the story he tells himself about himself. His Facebook profile, because all that stuff would be on Facebook. His pictures of his paintings and pictures of his dogs, his Alsatians, and of his lovely home in the woods. That would all be there. That's not the truth of his beliefs. You want to find out what he believes. It's hidden in his actions. So insurrection is partly saying that the point of doubt and asking yourself questions and interrogating is not so as to embrace cynicism or skepticism. It's to find out what you really believe. Find out what you really believe, because your beliefs are your operating system. It's like a mobile phone. The beliefs are not, you know, are not what comes onto the screen. Your beliefs are what make the thing operate. And like at Alcoholics Anonymous, the first thing you have to do is acknowledge, take the false story you tell yourself about yourself, all the false beliefs, here I believe in God, etc., and make them fit with your material reality. And then when you admit that in a community of grace that accept you for who you are, that don't ask you to change. And that's the trick, by the way. If you're in a community that asks you to change, that tell you to change, that prohibition just feeds the opposite. You say to your kid, don't open that cookie jar whenever I leave the room. The prohibition makes the kid go, what's in the cookie jar? What's in the cookie jar? Or if someone blocks their Facebook page, suddenly you really want to see what they're hiding. You weren't interested before until it's blocked. You know, the prohibition generates the opposite. The trick of Christianity, of course, is Community of grace, you don't have to change. We love you just the way you are. And yet, as you're able to admit your brokenness, admit your true beliefs, in a community of grace, those begin to be transformed and begin to be changed, and you become more human. We all want to become more like God. We all want to get out of our limited perspective and take a God's eye view. The great thing about Christianity is if you want to become like God, you've got to do what God did and become fully human. We need to become more human.